Hello and welcome to the next in the series of Garden to Plate workshops. I'm Chris Lampard and this is the Mandurah Community Gardens in Western Australia. Thank you to our sponsors. So this week we have been talking about seeds and seed collecting. So why would you want to collect seed? Well, because it's going to save you a lot of money, it's going to allow you to grow the varieties you want, and anytime you see something which you really like the look of, you have the opportunity to collect seed from it and therefore grow it. So, seed collection. So broadly speaking, for seed collection there are two types of seed. There's ones which come from flowers and ones which come from fruits. The ones that come from flowers are relatively simple to collect. You just wait for the flower to dry out, you look and see when the pod begins to go dry and you can see the seed beginning to go brown, cut the flower heads off, drop them into a paper bag and you're done. When it comes to fruits, for fruits which dry out, such as beans and peas, you just watch the pod. When the pod goes brown, crumbly, your seed's ready, you just pull the pods off, break them, seed comes out. For softer fruits such as melons or tomatoes, you need to cut the fruits open, scrape the seed out, lay it onto a piece of kitchen towel or baking paper, let it dry out in the sun, and once it's dried, you can just scrape the seeds off, pop them in a paper bag, and away you go. So once you've collected your seed, you then need to think about how you're going to dry your seed. So the way that you dry your seed is in something that breathes. So paper bags are really good, or those fine mesh plastic bags which are made of recycled plastic, often now used for shopping in place of one-use plastic bags. They're very, very good. They allow the air to circulate, they give the seed time to dry out, and the only other thing you need to know is if you do have your seed outdoors, make sure you protect it against the birds. Cover it with something to stop the birds getting on it, but make sure that that thing you're covering it with can still breathe. The important thing is to get moisture out, so you want them to breathe. Okay, once you've got your seed all collected, you may then want to clean it. Not everybody does this, but it's quite nice to clean the seed up because it then makes it easier to work with. To clean seed, particularly small seed, you basically need a sieve. You've got in there seed and chaff, and the chaff is things like petals and bits of leaf and things like this. You throw it in the sieve, give it a shake, the seed should drop through, the chaff gets left in the sieve, and you've got your seed nice and clean. For larger seed, you can usually just separate the seed by shaking it, the dry stuff comes to the top, scrape it off, and you've got your seed left at the bottom, particularly say for broad beans or peas. Okay, so once you've cleaned your seed and it's nice and dry, you're then of course going to want to store it. How do you store it? You make sure it stays dry, and you probably want to store it in the dark. Direct sunlight definitely isn't good for seed long-term storage, so dark is good. Again, I like to store my seed in paper bags because they breathe. You can store in jars, but make sure you keep the lid a little bit loose so that they can keep breathing. Don't store in plastic. Just don't put plastic anywhere near your seeds because plastic won't allow them to breathe and they can start rotting. So that's really all you need to know about seed collecting. If you're lucky enough to live near a group of seed savers, look up seed savers on the internet. You'll find a group of people who are passionate about seed collecting, probably have a big seed bank of heritage seeds. Very interesting, worth connecting with. Okay, once you've collected your seed, you're then going to want to sow it. Of course, there's no point collecting seed if you're not going to grow food from it. So just talking about sowing seed, the important thing to consider, of course, in sowing seed is the timing. You want to make sure you plant the right thing at the right time. We covered that in a previous workshop, including a nice handout which shows you a sowing chart for Western Australia. When it comes to sowing seed, you've basically got three options: trays, pots, or direct sowing. Trays, all you're doing there is you're getting the seed to strike, grow to the point where it's fairly small, it's got two sets of leaf on it, and then you're going to dig the seedling out gently and carefully, not disturbing its roots, and pot it on. You're then going to grow it on in the pot so you've got a nice big seedling, and that's going to be ready to go in the ground, good and strong. We had an earlier workshop on seedlings and talking about how to plant those, which you can refer back to. It was the first in the series. Okay, so to grow in a tray, the seed has all of the nutrients and material it needs to grow successfully, so your tray does not need to contain a rich potting mix. Any old mix will do. You put a layer of soil, you sprinkle your seed on the top of this, in rows is usually best, and then put a fine layer of soil over the top of that. General recommendation is to put a layer of soil on top between 1 and 3 times the width of the seed. You don't need to be too pedantic, just cover them gently. The trick with trays then is to make sure that they're moist but not wet. So you just want to keep the top nice and wet because that will allow the seeds to germinate. Once they germinate, you can begin to thin them out, and then once they reach the stage where you've got 2 sets of leaves, you can prick them out and pop them on. Trays are very good for small, fine seed where it's difficult to just sow a small amount. So lettuces, broccolis, things like that go well in trays. Larger seeds, it's usually better to plant them into pots because you've got more depth, and also you don't really want to disturb the roots on them, so things like beans and peas. The pot, you're going to grow the seedling onto full size before you put it in the garden, so you're going to need a lot more nutrients in here because that plant's going to want to feed. So into the pot I would make up a mix with a potting mix, add some manure, add some worm castings, maybe add some blood and bone, things like this. Get a nice mix, put it in the pot, put a little hole in, drop your pea or bean or whatever seed you're putting in there, drop it in, cover it over, let it grow. Once your seedlings are grown up to about this size, they're then ready for the garden, you can pot them out. Okay, so that's pots. The last type of sowing is direct sowing. This is where you just sow directly into your garden. You want to make sure your soil is nice and rich, ready for the growth. You want to have a nice smooth seed bed, put some furrows, put your seed along it, cover it over, make sure you mark it, and then as your seed begins to come up, you'll need to thin down. Why would you direct sow? Well, sometimes it's better because you get a stronger plant because you're not disrupting its roots twice as you move it through. But also there are some species which just have to be planted directly into the soil. And this is all the root crops, the carrots, the onions, turnips, things like this. They do not like being grown in seed trays and then put out into the ground. You don't get good fruits. So if you want good carrots, sow direct. The way to sow carrots is it's very, very fine seed, so you're best to mix it with a bit of sand, probably about 10 to 1, 10 sand to 1 seed. Sprinkle that on and you'll get a much finer distribution of seed. Put them in the furrows, as I say, cover them over, keep them nice and moist. Your seeds will pop up in no time at all. You can thin them down, and before you know it, you'll be eating fabulous vegetables straight out of the ground. Okay, that's all we've got to say about seeds. Thanks very much for your attention, and I'll see you next time.